Chapter 1. A Walk Through the Eerie Forest. Our story begins in a middle-of-nowhere county town known as Widgeber. Widgeber was a town shrouded in mystery. It only had a handful of locals. The beach was often gloomy and gray and as otherworldly as the rest of the town. It truly was a town that time forgot. The whole place had a certain feel about it, as if something evil was plaguing this town, perhaps a curse or local superstition, but you could feel the dread on the locals' faces. Widgeber was also surrounded by layers of forest that looked like it had seen a better day. Quite a few trees were destroyed, yet not by chainsaws or by some delinquents playing with fire, but more like the life had been sucked from the forest in certain areas. Gellert Stockman, an elderly lighthouse keeper who kept watch over the Widgeber Torch lighthouse, walked through the dense forest with a sense of dread hanging over him. The trees loomed above him, casting eerie shadows on the ground. He heard the rustling of leaves behind him and quickened his pace. Was something following him? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every now and then, he spun around, but there was nothing there. The silence was deafening, except for the sound of his footsteps. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He had never felt so alone and vulnerable before. As he walked, he thought about the stories he had heard about the forest, stories of strange occurrences and unexplained happenings. He had always dismissed them as mere superstitions, but now he wasn't so sure. Gellert's mind raced with questions, but he pushed them aside, knowing that he had to focus on getting out of the forest. He quickened his pace, hoping to leave whatever was causing his fear behind in the woods. But the mystery of what was happening continued to weigh heavily on his mind. His quickened pace then went from a fast-paced walk to running full speed. He had to get home to the Widgeber Torch lighthouse there. He felt safe and sure nothing could harm him there. As he ran, he couldn't help but think, why now? Why was this happening now? Every other time he had taken a stroll through the forest and visited the town or bought some supplies, not one incident. So, what has changed? Why did today feel so different? Why did Gellert Stockman feel something was after him? He had lived and played in this forest ever since he was a child. His family lived in Widgeber for generations. As he ran trying to come up with some possible explanation, all he could think was how he wished his father was still the lighthouse keeper. He would know what to do. Unfortunately, Gellert's father passed away just 2 months ago. Gellert was in the clear, as he can see his lighthouse just ahead as he races for it, running and crawling up the steep hill, giving it all his might. As he returned, he felt truly relieved. This was his home, this was his sanctuary, and he always felt safe inside the lighthouse. Yes, in just 5 minutes, he could brush off the whole experience to nothing more than an overreaction. Yes, that was it the whole time. It was just the wind. Gellert entered the lighthouse and locked the door behind him, feeling relieved that he was finally safe. He went to the kitchen to make himself a cup of tea and tried to calm down. But as he waited for the kettle to boil, he heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. At first, he tried to convince himself that it was just the wind, but the noise grew louder and more persistent. Gellert couldn't ignore it any longer. He cautiously climbed the stairs, 1 step at a time, his heart racing with fear. Hands shaken, he grabs his dad's rifle, pointing it forward as he climbed the stairs. As he reached the top of the stairs, he saw that the door to the lighthouse's lantern room was open. He knew he had locked it before leaving for his walk in the forest. "Whoever is inside the lantern room, you have 5 seconds to come out before I pump your guts full of lead," Gellert yelled. He tried to sound brave as possible. Fearful and shaking, he slowly approached the door and peered inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. The lantern room was filled with an eerie green light, and there was a figure standing in the center of the room. It was a woman, but she was not like any woman Gellert had ever seen. She wore a long white dress, her hair was wild and unkempt. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, her skin was so pale it was as white as milk. Gellert stood frozen, unable to move or even breathe. The woman turned her head slowly towards him, and a chill ran down his spine. He knew that he was in grave danger. Suddenly, the woman began to move towards him, her feet barely touching the ground. Gellert turned and ran as fast as he could down the stairs, but he knew it was no use. He could hear her laughter echoing through the lighthouse as she followed him. As Gellert reached the ground floor, he felt a cold hand grab his shoulder. He turned around, expecting to see the woman, but there was no one there. He was alone in the lighthouse, and yet he knew that he was not safe. Instead of seeing the girl, the room is suddenly filled with a tendril of mist. Gellert watched in horror as the mist filled the room. He pointed his rifle at the ready hands, shaking with fear that he couldn't hide his finger, ready to squeeze the trigger. The mist began to envelop Gellert. The lighthouse was not visible. It was almost like he was now in a different world. A world of mist terror overcame him as he felt something tap his leg. Surprised, he points and opens fire. The loud bang of the gunshot echoes throughout the lighthouse as he begins firing more rounds in random directions. Reacting to the loud sounds of crashing and movement, he could hear all from the house, but could not see. He regains his composure, breathing less heavily, and calming down, listening and moving cautiously. He detects movement above and opens fire above, unsure if he hit anything. Suddenly, something from above lifts him into the air and drops him flat on his face. Before Gellert could regain his footing, he is. Suddenly pulled into the mist, he tried to grab the floor and anything else to fight against whatever had him, but it was too strong. Gellert screamed in horror as he was being dragged into the unknown. Gellert's screams for help go unheard, as whatever is hidden inside the tendril of mist continues to drag him further into the ocean's mysterious fog. The darkness is disorienting, and he struggles to keep his equilibrium as he is swept up by the mysterious force. Gellert sees faint reflections of glowing eyes in the fog, but before he can take a closer look, he is pulled further into the fog and out of sight. As he is dragged deeper and deeper into the darkness, Gellert feels a sense of helplessness wash over him. He knows that he is not alone, but he can't see what surrounds him. His vision is nothing but the dark black abyss of the ocean depths.